Confidence is the memory of success. Celebrate a healthy action. Celebration is the opportunity for redemption. Fitness to connect to the. Oh, hey, hi, hey, Matt Miller here. Welcome, everyone. I was actually caught up in my journaling and notes from yesterday from our friends Carla and Hubert, who just hit it out of the park yesterday. And so, shout out to them on just having a phenomenal mind gym. And I took their activity. We'll talk about that here in a second. But without further ado, I want to bring my friend on, Elle Nelson, coming in live from Montana.
Montana today. I know. I saw Anthony in the chat and Anthony, I'm not over in London with you. What's going on?
Our regulars hopping in. Lane, let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm coming from St. Louis, my friend Elle. And friend, I can't put as the first role, wife, coach, but new dear friend of mine. And so Elle, thank you for joining me. I was just going through my notes and forgot we were going live. And I just want to give a shout out to our room tilter, our colleagues. Actually so Hubert and Carla did that activity last night, not only myself, but did a coaching session as well, where we took the activity yesterday of celebrating and choosing either a relationship, ourselves to celebrate, or a higher power, and then like taking a next step with that. And so I just have to give a shout out to Hubert because I did it with a coaching client, and I woke up this morning to this text that said, headed to bed, spent the 5 minutes doing the celebrating, and the person said, P.S., I couldn't believe how powerful that shaped my day already today. And so this whole theme of what we're talking about, not only yesterday of celebrating and the confidence, but today's topic of EQ. You know, we talk about IQ and EQ. And so, Elle, can you get us started on kind of our topic, what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll start unpacking it with everyone.
Yeah, of course. I'm honored. And let me say, I'm already, because I was traveling yesterday, so I didn't have an opportunity to catch the live. So remember, if you did not catch it yesterday, that's okay. I'm gonna find the link and I'm gonna drop it in the chat later on because this sounds like one that we do not want to miss. So I can't wait to get my hands on it. Okay, so we're talking about emotional intelligence today. And part of the reason why, so I did a little bit of research. I like to get my facts. And I found this 40-year study that was conducted by UC Berkeley through their PhD program. And they found that EQ, so that emotional intelligence, is 4 times more powerful than IQ when it comes to determining a person's success in their career path. And so this is something that I hear about all the time in so many different career paths as well. I work primarily in sport, but it's talked about so often. You hear in interviews people talking about relationships, talking about connection, talking about mindfulness. And so this just seemed like a topic that was well worth exploring today. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about, emotional intelligence. What does that word mean to you, Matt? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I was super excited, as I shared with you, and I've shared with our community, spending the first 25 years with kids and being an elementary principal. One of the things I realized right away was, okay, we know we're here to teach kids the academic and read and write and all of those pieces. And I knew there was so much more. And so even being a highly performing school, we knew we were missing the mark. And so once we started really leaning into the EQ piece of these kiddos and talking about leadership and building culture and the things that we're going to talk about today, ironically, the academics went up, right? And so, because we had a more engaged kid, because they were more self-aware, they showed more empathy, they had the social skills. And we all know those are the skills that are playing out as we work with young adults, coaching in the corporate. And so as we talk about Transformational Tuesday today, we are shifting the gears of not so much, what you know, but how are we going about that and really unpacking this EQ. And so we have kind of 5 areas we're going to unpack, and then we're going to end today with an exercise that really gets you focused on leadership and then really leaving, as you know, with the next right step. So
Mhm.
Ellie, you want to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Mari, let me just give you a shout out first of all, because you were quick dropping that link. So thank you. And then she was quick as well, getting this graph right up on stage or this visual. So I think the way this visual looks is such a good representation of like the foundation when it comes to EQ, so that emotional intelligence. So you already mentioned a few of those pieces, Matt, and we'll dive briefly into each one of those. So the first component is on the bottom there, we see self-awareness. We've got self-regulation. We'll touch a little on motivation and then empathy and social skills. So if you'd like, take a quick screenshot, grab your phone, or if you got paper, you can draw this really quick. So Mari, if you wouldn't mind leaving it up for a minute or two. But let's just dive straight in, maybe go to the first component. So that self-awareness piece, I mean, this is huge, right? We transform from the inside out. We have to know ourselves to be able to then connect with others and build those relationships. So that's the self-awareness piece. It's recognizing and understanding yourself, your moods, your emotions, your patterns, all those different areas, right? It's really understanding and knowing yourself. Easier said than done, right? It's a journey, it's an ongoing journey, but that's the first component. So, what do you think about that one, Matt?
Well, and
Self-awareness.
it's just, those that have been on our app, we talk about being here, right? And where your feet are. And what are the first pieces of that? Noticing, right? Just noticing how I feel. In fact, shout out to one of our leaders, Josh Lifrack. I noticed a post he did where he's leaning against the wall. That was kind of a good visuals because it caught my eye. I think it was on LinkedIn. But his step was like acknowledging, like noticing, right, is the first step. And so I think in this self-awareness, the more that we can realize, and we have so much coming at us throughout the day, right? Through personally, professionally, whatever it may be, and just trying to stay in our circle of what we have control over and noticing what is in our circle and not being so distracted on everything that's coming at us from outside our circle. How about you when you think of self-awareness?
No, I mean, so whenever I work with a client, the very first or one of the first conversations we have is about awareness because we're trying to intentionally put these mental reps in, right? We're trying to influence and change our brain so that we can get the most out of our life, out of our bodies, out of what we do, performance relationships. But it has to start with awareness because if we're not aware, then how can we train it? How can we influence it? How can we change it? So we will have a whole conversation, sometimes more, just about the importance of awareness and how we can start to notice things in ourselves, right? I think oftentimes we're so focused on what's going on around us that we're not as much paying attention to who we are, and how we operate so that we can get to know ourselves. So that's the first part. And it's again easier said than done. It takes practice. All of this takes deliberate practice, but I mean, is it Colin Henderson says, name it to tame it, right? We have to be able to understand it before we can train it.
And the thing, as you were talking and I was listening, and also it brought up the fact of sometimes when we're noticing, that's more of a
Right.
reactive situation, which is fine. And I think as coaches and room tilters, and what we do very well is we help people get on the proactive side of that, to be
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm joining this live at 11:30. What's my intention, right? Where am I going to be self-aware, and I'm coming in with that intention. And
Yeah.
the more I coach around really helping people time block their day, and then once they get to that time, what's that intention? Because
Mhm.
that changes from hour to hour, right? In our work schedule, in our personal lives, like, okay, this hour I need to show up and be a better listener. But this next one that I'm showing up to, I need to be more courageous. I need to be more vulnerable. I need to share. And so, again, just being self aware of what my intention is going into each kind of block of time or moment, I think is critical. And so, whether it be on the proactive side of setting an intention or on the reactive side of, okay, I'm in this meeting or I'm in this situation and I'm noticing myself trying whatever, whatever that may be that you're noticing.
And I think that's usually I think usually for most people, that's where the awareness starts, is noticing the reaction. And then once you see the reaction, you start to see in yourself maybe what led to that. So then you can get to the side of being more proactive, being
Yep.
more intentional. So I think that that reactive can be a good way to shed awareness and notice patterns, and then help you to be more proactive, which I think leads nicely into the second component here of EQ. So we've got self-management and regulation, which really is the ability to think before you act, right? It's that space, that gap of something just happened, and now what am I going to do? And that, again, it's a skill. It takes work. It starts with awareness, but it's that space of thinking before you act.
Yeah, the old power of the pause, right? The space between stimulus and response. And so I was literally smiling when you were saying that because again, thinking back to I still work with kids, but being in a school where 600 of them are running around, what are we helping them do? The exact same thing that we're talking about, which is stop and think. And I think too many times as adults, we forget that we need to be modeling that and doing that first, right? We should never be asking anybody to do anything that we're not doing ourselves. And so, how do we, like you said, from awareness to being like, okay, now what's my next right step based on what I'm noticing, right?
Mhm.
And usually, like you said, we make better decisions when we put some space in between what's
Yeah.
happening and how I respond to that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it takes you from the passenger seat into the driver's seat, right? That's what the pause does. It's like, "Okay, how would I like to move forward? How am I going to choose to move forward?" So that the power in the pause is everything.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, all right, let's continue on here. Mari, can you pull that up really quick? I wanna make sure I get the next one on here. Yeah, so self-motivation. Matt, this is actually one that I wanna hear from you about, because for everybody who's joining in, we had a little conversation and we talked through this visual before we jumped on the call, and Matt gave such great insight into motivation. So I wanna actually just, like, give the stage to you on this one and share the insight.
Well, I think as coaches, we have a little bit more permission. This is just Matt Miller's opinion, not Limitless Minds, but like of getting quicker to the point of not spending too much time in our field, like quickly noticing how we're feeling
Right.
so that we can get into our circle of control and take our next right step. And so I say that because I think I need to always pay attention to myself that I'm giving empathy, which is the next one we're going to talk about, but then also in a very balanced way, be like, okay, so can we start talking about, the next step and what that looks like? And so I say that because too many times I think people sit in that what has happened piece,
Mm,
in the past, negativity, whatever it may be, and they're waiting for motivation. And it's my experience in my 30 years that the only thing we can do is start moving,
right.
and that creates the momentum that creates the motivation. And I think I've said it many times on here, but movement creates the momentum that creates the motivation. And so as hard as that situation is that we're dealing with, whatever it may be, workplace, personal, whatever,
Mhm.
acknowledge it, notice it, get in our circle of what we have control over, and then just the smallest of next steps leads to the next steps. And so I think what we do a beautiful job as coaches and again, team members, everyone that's on here, right? You're helping somebody is not only modeling it yourself, but
Mhm.
sometimes we need someone else, right? We need a spotter. We need somebody that's like, "Hey, Ellie, okay, what's your next step?" Right?
Yeah.
So, how about you when you think of this whole piece of motivation?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It makes me think of, I have a lot of conversations around confidence and, trying to train someone to be confident, but confident is like a feeling where it can come and it can go. I can, give a workshop or deliver a workshop on something that I feel I know so much about, and I feel great, and I'm psyched, and let's do it, and then I might leave the room, and I might be in a room full of, scientist and I'm like, whoa, I'm out of my league. All of a sudden, my confidence might shift. Or maybe I'm thrown into some activity that I've never ever done before, or some type of movement I've never ever done before. And I might not feel that confident. So confidence can come and it can go. And when I talk to my clients about that, I'm like, how about we look at courage? Because courage is an action. That is something in your control that you can take, and it will breed confidence. It can, but ultimately, courage allows us to take that step with, right? We're acknowledging that there's
Love
fear
it.
and that's okay. So it really, it's that it's in your control. What's in your locus of control? And I think it's the same exact thing with motivation that you said. It's that movement. We might not have motivation. And motivation in this case, when we're talking about EQ, is this like desire and passion and feeling that you are contributing and working towards something greater than yourself. And so that's what this motivation in terms of EQ is. Um, but still, like there might be days where life's heavy sometimes. There's other
Mhm.
stuff going on, and you might not feel that motivation. But when you lean into movement, that can fuel it. So
Oh,
I completely agree with you.
and I think the thing you just said that connects into what Hubert was talking about yesterday is like different settings. He was using systems, right? We have our family circle and we have our work circle
Right.
and so forth. And they require different energy and motivation on that. And I think the default sometimes is if I'm struggling in one area, well then I overcompensate in the other to try to ignore or not deal with the thing that I know that I need to deal with, right? And
Yeah.
again, might be just waiting for the motivation. It's like, no, well, we got to, like I said, get in the circle and take the next couple steps. And so let's unpack the last couple. And so those of you tuning in or tuning in later, you should have self-awareness. And Mari, maybe you can throw that visual up. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Self-awareness, self-regulation, right? Leads into that motivation. And then let's quickly unpack the next two, and then we'll go into our activity.
Absolutely. Okay, empathy. We talk about this a lot. Love empathy for Brene Brown fans. We know this word well, but really it's the ability to the way I think about it is the ability to be and see someone, right? It's not just, oh, um like I'm going to look at you and like, oh, go, oh, that's really hard, or oh, it must be like that. No, I'm going to sit with you in that. I want to feel what you feel. I want to see it through your eyes. I want to understand so that you feel heard. And that builds relationships right there.
One of
Right.
the one of the greatest activities that I love to facilitate with any organization, whether it be a school and so forth, is
Right.
just do a stand up, hand up, pair up, and find somebody you haven't talked to in a while, and literally take a couple minutes and be like, share a couple things they don't know about you. And in literally 2 or 3 minutes, I'll stop everyone and be like, what'd you hear? And they'll be like, we've worked together for 15 years and I just learned this about so and so, right?
Mm,
And it's just that reminder of everyone's looking for the magic bullet when it comes to culture and climate. And it's just taking time to build relationships with one another, to know each other's story and build that trust. And I always say, until we know each other's story, we don't have a relationship. You and I have been intentional on that. We've been very intentional on spending more time so we know each other's story. That has led to a better relationship. Same thing in the workplace or personally. And once I know your story, empathy flows. I have better understanding. That thing that was driving me crazy about you, now I understand, right? Like we just don't slow down sometimes. So I think unpacking that in a simple way
yeah.
um, is key in this triangle we're talking about today.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that actually leads nicely into the social skills, which is the next one. And one of the biggest parts of social skills, or one of the biggest components, I think, is the ability to listen, to understand, and not to respond. And I think that goes nicely with empathy too, because you're trying to remove that judgment. You're trying to remove your ego to say, I'm listening, right? I want to hear what you have to say. And I think it's natural sometimes for us to think, well, how does this impact me? Or, oh, what's my role? I'm talking to you. And we just think about ourselves a lot of the time. But to be able to go, do you know what? I'm gonna set myself aside and I'm gonna be with you. And I want to understand. So that I think really goes hand in hand with empathy, the social skills.
And again, I'm smiling because a lot of you know I come out of the 7 habits world. And so habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be
Mm,
understood. And we forget that listening is a skill and we don't practice it enough. And most of us aren't great listeners. And I think the superpower at our disposal is to say less and just listen and
yeah.
keep your autobiographical responses out of those pieces. And so go
So
ahead.
I'm gonna just say something really quick. This is something that I've been really intentional about for a couple of years because I'm one of those people that if someone's talking, I'm like, oh, I've got a question for them. And so, but I don't want to interrupt because I want to listen, but I've got a question for them and I'll hold on to that question. And so my challenge that I've given myself, and this has helped me train that social skill, is after 5 seconds, if there's not a pause for me to ask that question and this person is continuing to talk, right? If I'm holding on to that question, my ability to listen has severely been hindered. And so after 5 seconds, if there hasn't been an opportunity to ask it and it's not a question that is massively important, I choose to let it go in my brain. I'm like, I'm letting it go with the wind. And I don't even remember the question after that because I'm back in the conversation. And that's been massive for me.
Totally. You know what I thought you were going to go there with is you were going to say, "Hey, can I stop you just for a second?" And then you ask that question. I think that might have been, just clarification, right? As long as you didn't go into like your story or let me tell you I've been here before, like,
Right.
keeping those out. So I thought you were going a different way with that. All right. So with 7 minutes left on the clock, let's
Good
take
timing.
Sean and Justin and Lane and everyone that's tuning in, and those of you tuning in later. We want to take you through just a quick exercise that
Yeah.
gets us focused on, we love having you leave with the next right step. And so Ellie's going to take us through just a quick activity. So get something to write with, journal, something in front of you, and we will take you through these 3 easy steps.
Okay, let's do it. So piece of paper out, pen. Now, what I want you to do, we're going to be tapping into the self-awareness piece and the self-regulation piece. What I want you to do is think about a leader, right? That the best leader in your eyes that you've come across, maybe worked for, worked under, been mentored by, or just, seen from afar and appreciated. So think of a leader that really stands out to you personally. So while we're letting people think about that, Matt, is there anybody that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, my coworker here in the office, John O'Leary, and so he's a couple doors down, but he's one that I look up to, and so I wrote his name down. How about you?
I wrote one of my old coaches down in England. Um, they were just somebody that like really made an impact on my playing career, even though it was like a difficult part of my playing career. I wouldn't have had it any other way, and it was a big part because of my coach.
Love it. So everybody should have one leader in mind. So write that down. Step 2.
Step 2, now we're gonna think of 5, top 5 qualities in this leader. Top 5 qualities.
And so as they're writing them down, I'll share mine and then you can share
That
yours,
sounds
Ellie.
amazing. Okay.
So I wrote down positive, optimistic, caring, helpful, and balanced, which
Mm,
ironically have nothing to do with IQ and everything to do with EQ.
thank you.
How about you?
Funny how that works, isn't it? Funny how that works. So the qualities that I came up with, one was relational, the ability to have relationships and see everybody as equal, whether it's the janitor, whether it's, the men's coach, whatever it is. Attentive, a great communicator, like clear and concise, and dedicated to their craft, like a lot of commitment, and then they lead from within. So amongst the team, not in front of the team.
Awesome. So by now, after I'm sharing and Ellie's sharing, you should have at least 4 or 5 written down. So last step to take us to our next step, Ellie.
Last step to take us to our next step. All right. We're going to simplify it. Scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the greatest, 1 being the least. What would you rate yourself when it comes to these different qualities and traits? And also feel free to type them in the chat if you'd like as well. It'd be great to hear some of these.
And by the way, we talk about doing simple better as you're rating yourself. Such a simple exercise to do in like any form or fashion, right? In this exercise where we've labeled 5, at the end of your day, hey, how was the day? Scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, 4. Okay. How do I get it to a 5? Or 7? How do I get, like, just that natural reflection? What are we doing? We're becoming aware. We're looking at those pieces. What's going to motivate us to make the next day the best day? So I have my little scale from 1 to 5. So last step. I guess I said last step before. This is the last step.
It's fine. I was rolling with it. Okay. So now that you've done that, we are not going to commit to working on every single one of these right now, right? We're going to start with 1 and make this the commitment. It's still early on in the week. We're going to make this the commitment for the week. So I want you to pick one of these traits. That could be the one that you've marked yourself the lowest on, one that really feels important to you with your circumstances, just one that stands out. Now, thinking of that one quality and trait, we're going to get even more reflective here, even more self-aware. I want you to try and identify when you would be most vulnerable or at risk to not being a reflection of this trait. So, for example, if I wrote down communication, when would I struggle the most to communicate? Like what moments or circumstances or triggers might cause me to not communicate my best? So I have to, again, dive deep, try and know myself, understand it, and then without judgment, go, okay, hey, when does this tend to happen? So Matt, would you mind sharing one of yours?
Yeah. And so one of those that I starred that I want to do a better job of is just balance. I think when my knee jerk is to focus on others and be like, oh, instead of one more thing to take care of me, I'm going to find somewhere else to put my energy. And so mine is just making sure that I'm putting that oxygen mask on first every day and then helping others. And so just making sure that I'm really paying attention to my balance and making sure. So how about you?
Mine, thank you for sharing, by the way. It helps me get to know you better and also everybody listening in. So thanks for sharing that part of you. I would say I'll choose communication. I gave that one as an example. So I think when it comes to clear and concise communication, if I have a lot of different tasks going on, especially if they're in different areas, my communication will sometimes decrease. It's almost like I'm trying to conserve energy. And so there are gaps when I try and communicate to other people. And I've noticed that because then I'll get more questions or things come back later on. And so that is a time when I think, and this is what we're going to do with that. Now that I've identified a time or an area, a moment where I'm less likely to be able to do that, there's intention with that, right? So if we notice that we're getting into that position, so if I notice that I've got a lot of different tasks going on, now that I've really been intentional about identifying that my communication is lacking, and I think that's important, right? For a leader, for anybody, and we're talking about our EQ here, it's that much more important for me to emphasize and be intentional about my communication because I've identified that that's an area.
Love it. Which brings it full circle to where we started, which is self-awareness, right? So at the top of the hour, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Tomorrow, Workplace Wednesday, you got Mike and Hubert. Hubert's like my man crush right now, so it's on my calendar. So Ellie, thank you for everything. Thank you for leading us today. And I hope everyone chooses to have a great rest of the week.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Have a wonderful week, everyone.